was it today? How was the car today? How did it perform, and was it as expected? I know you had that little slide, but other than that?
No, we didn't really know what to expect. I had hoped that we would be better. But yeah, the car didn't feel particularly great.
Lots of teams bought upgrades. You've bought quite a big package. Were the team expecting more from here, or will it be better at other tracks, do you think?
I have no idea.
Sorry?
I have no idea. I thought we would be stronger than we were today. We'd have to do some work overnight to try and figure out why we're not that quick. And yeah, I was hopeful coming in positive that we're going to be much higher, but not meant to be.
How is it possible that a 7-time world champion finishes 7th and still leaves the most forceful statement of the entire season? Because what Lewis Hamilton said after the sprint qualifying in Miami 2026 not only explains his result, it could uncover Ferrari's real problem that no one wants to recognize. The beginning of everything in Miami 2026 was not simply another sprint classification. It was the point where many pieces began to fit, and others directly broke in front of everyone's eyes. From the first moment, the session left contradictory feelings in Ferrari, but especially in Lewis Hamilton. Because as the stopwatch ticked and the times began to drop, there was something that didn't quite add up. It wasn't a lack of pure rhythm, it wasn't an adaptation problem, it was something deeper. Something that had already been dragging on from previous races but that was completely exposed on this circuit. In the early stages of qualifying, Hamilton showed a very different face than the result would ultimately reflect. His performance in SQ2 was a clear sign that the potential was there. He managed to place himself among the best, competing directly with the strongest names on the grid, showing that when the car enters the right window, it can respond. And that is the most dangerous thing about this whole situation. Ferrari is not completely out, it is not lost. It is at an intermediate point where it can excite and disappoint in a matter of minutes. But everything changed at the decisive moment. SQ3 was the starkest reflection of reality. When everyone brought out their maximum performance, when every detail counts and the difference between shining or falling is measured in thousands, Ferrari simply could not sustain itself. Hamilton fell to 7th position, leaving a considerable distance from the best time. And that is where reading stops being superficial. It's not just a bad lap, it's confirmation of a structural limitation that always appears in the same place, the straights. The Miami circuit does not forgive that type of weakness. It is a route that combines technical sectors with long straights where power makes enormous differences. And Ferrari once again paid the price. While in curves the car was competitive, even capable of fighting against the best, as soon as the time came to accelerate fully, the disadvantage was evident. There was no way to make up for it. No matter how well you came out of the corner, time was inevitably lost meters ahead. And this is where the narrative tension of this entire act begins to build. Because Hamilton is not just any driver. He is someone who perfectly understands when a result is circumstantial, and when it is the consequence of a real problem. And what happened in Miami was no accident. It was the repetition of a pattern that I had previously identified. A car strong in technical sectors but clearly limited by its power unit. This contrast generates a very particular situation within the team. On the one hand, they have a working aerodynamic base which could even be one of the best on the grid in certain conditions. But on the other hand, that strength is completely neutralized by a critical weakness. It's like having half a winning car and half a car that drags you back. And in today's Formula One, that kind of imbalance is simply unsustainable if you want to fight for something important. The most disturbing thing is that this problem does not seem easy to solve in the short term. We are not talking about a setup adjustment, nor a minor improvement. We are talking about the power unit, one of the most complex and least flexible elements during the season. And that turns each classification, each race, into a kind of imposed limit that the team cannot easily overcome. Hamilton did not hesitate. He did not try to soften the result or hide behind the usual excuses. He went straight to the problem. He pointed out the lack of power as the determining factor, as the barrier that is conditioning absolutely all of the car's performance. And the most important thing is not just what he says, but how he says it. Because it doesn't sound like an isolated complaint, it sounds like something accumulated, a frustration that has been growing race after race. What makes this statement especially shocking is that it is not new, but it is more forceful than ever. Hamilton had already warned about this problem in previous races. He had already mentioned that they were losing too much time on the straight, but in Miami the message changes tone. Here it is no longer a technical observation, it is almost a requirement. He had even anticipated the need for a new engine, making it clear that within the team there is a real urgency to find solutions. And this opens up a much more complex scenario than it seems. Because when a driver like Hamilton starts putting pressure publicly like this, it's not just because of the result of a session. It's because he understands that the problem can define the entire season. He knows perfectly well that in today's Formula One, losing on the straight is not something you can easily compensate for. You can improve in corners, you can optimize strategies, but if your top speed is not up to par, you are doomed in qualifying, and even more so in the race. This is where the contrast becomes almost frustrating. Because Hamilton also recognizes that the car has very positive aspects. It speaks of a car that feels good, that responds in technical sectors, that can even compete with other teams in certain conditions. But immediately afterwards, all that is invalidated by the same limitation: power. It is a constant duality. A car that promises, but doesn't deliver when it really matters. This type of situation generates enormous internal tension. Because from the outside it may seem that Ferrari is close, that it is just a few small adjustments away from making the leap. But from inside, the perception is completely different. Hamilton makes it clear between the lines. It is not a minor detail, it is a structural problem. And that completely changes the team's perspective. Furthermore, there is another key point that begins to be built in this act: time. The season progresses, opportunities pass, and Ferrari continues to carry the same deficit. And Hamilton knows it. That is why his speech is no longer patient, it is no longer adaptive like at the beginning of the year. Now it is the speech of someone who needs immediate answers. And this is where the story reaches its most tense point. Because we are not just facing a technical problem. We are facing the beginning of a possible emotional fracture between pilot and project if things do not change. Hamilton continues to believe in potential, but each statement shows that this confidence begins to depend on concrete results, not promises. From here, the question is no longer what happened in the sprint classification. The real question is what Ferrari is going to do now. Because they have two very clear paths. The first, react immediately, bring real solutions, especially in the power unit, and show Hamilton that this project has the capacity to respond. The second, much more dangerous, is to stay in the discourse, in the promises, in small improvements that do not change the underlying problem. And that second path has consequences. Hamilton is not a driver in the learning phase, he is not building his career. He is at a stage where every season counts, where every missed opportunity weighs twice as much. And that is why his words in Miami have a much deeper meaning. You're not describing a problem, you're drawing a boundary. If the car doesn't evolve, if Ferrari doesn't manage to close that gap on the straight, everything else stops mattering. In addition, there is a factor that is beginning to become critical: direct comparison with rivals. While teams like McLaren and Mercedes continue to show progress, Ferrari remains trapped in the same weakness. And in Formula One, standing still is going backwards. Every race where you don't solve a structural problem is a race where your rivals get even further away. The most delicate thing about all this is that the situation can no longer be disguised with specific results. Even if Ferrari achieves a good result in a race due to specific circumstances, the problem will still be there. And Hamilton knows it. That's why he insists so much on potency, that's why he repeats the same diagnosis. Because he understands that without resolving that, there is no possible championship, there is no real fight. And this is where the act reaches its most critical point: trust. Ferrari needs to maintain Hamilton's trust, but that trust no longer depends on words, it depends on actions. It depends on whether in the next races we see a different car, a car that does not lose everything on the straights, a car capable of maintaining what it promises in the curves. If that doesn't happen, the narrative can change quickly. What is controlled frustration today can become something much bigger. Because when a driver like Hamilton starts repeating the same problem over and over again, it's not a coincidence. It's a sign that the situation is reaching a breaking point. The conclusion of everything that happened in the Miami 2026 sprint classification does not revolve solely around a 7th position. It revolves around a truth that can no longer be hidden within Ferrari. Because what we saw on the track was only the reflection of something much deeper, and what we heard later from the mouth of Lewis Hamilton was the definitive confirmation that the problem is real, constant, and above all, urgent. Ferrari has a car that is half exciting. A car capable of shining in technical sectors, of competing in curves, of showing glimpses that the potential exists. But at the same time, a car that collapses at the most critical moment, the straights. And in modern Formula One, that weakness is non-negotiable. It is a direct condemnation to always stay one step behind. Hamilton, with his experience, with his weight within the sport, has done something that few drivers dare to do with such clarity. exposed the problem bluntly. And that completely changes the scenario. Because it is no longer an internal issue, it is no longer something that can be worked on in silence. Now it is public, visible pressure which forces Ferrari to respond. The most important thing of all is that this is not a closed story, it is the beginning of something much bigger. Miami 2026 marks the point where excuses end and decisions begin. Ferrari has to show if it is really ready to make the leap or if it will remain stuck in that middle zone where you are not fast enough to win, but also not slow enough to rebuild from scratch. And in the middle of all this is Hamilton. A pilot who still believes in the project, but who has already made it clear that this confidence has a limit. Because when you repeat the same problem race after race, when you see that potential does not translate into results, there comes a time when it is no longer enough to wait. The conclusion is clear and forceful. Miami was not just a bad classification. It was the moment in which Ferrari was exposed, and in which Hamilton sent the most direct message of the entire season. Now, the story no longer depends on what the driver says, it depends on what the team does. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.